everyone. This is Nitha Ramachandra from the NRR Sports Show. This is episode 861, alongside with my co-host Kia Lyons for the show, and we're joined by a really special guest. His name is Sean Conley. He's a former NFL kicker, but obviously some injury cut his career short. But we're gonna get to all that. But now he's a yoga teacher, and now he has a book called The Point After: How One Resilient Kicker Learned There Was More Life to the NFL. And man, your story is such an inspiration. I just want to say thank you for joining the show, Sean. And I'm really looking forward to this interview. And first of all, how are you and your family doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me on. This is exciting. No, we're doing well, enjoying the summer, and going to a lot of baseball games, and just making the most of being outside these days.
Sean, it's so great to have you here. Would love to. Your story is a special one. I think it's pretty incredible that you've moved from kicker to yoga master, instructor, and author. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's when my whole football career began, this is probably, I'm doing like the last thing I ever imagined that I would be doing. But what happened was I was like many athletes, I was obsessed of someday, making it to the big time, making it to the NFL, making it to the NBA. So from a very young age, I started playing football at age 8, and that was my goal to, someday make the NFL. Unfortunately, because I was so obsessed, and because I trained so hard, and because I was so one track minded, I had a lot of injuries along the way. And unfortunately, instead of taking rest or being a more balanced athlete, so to speak, I just kept driving and playing through injuries.
Wow.
And what it eventually did to me is my endurance didn't last. And so instead of my leg being able to kick until well into my 30s, by the time I was 25, my hip flexor had degenerated, where it was separated. When I was with the Jets, they actually found that there was the hip flexor was gone. And so that was it. So it was just from training too much and kicking too many footballs. But that's what eventually led me to yoga, because of the injuries. So in the end, it was a good thing.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. Did you get a cadaver put in your hip, like in the flexor area?
No, just nothing. I just no longer kicked, and just moved on. Unfortunately, so I haven't been able to play too many sports since then. But I can do stuff like yoga. I can walk. I can hike, stuff like that. But kicking a football, probably not.
Right.
Not a good idea now.
Well, I'm glad that you have your mind and your body, and you can still do a lot of things. So that's a great upside of it.
For sure.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, take me through the process of what made you interested in becoming a kicker, and did you play any other positions before choosing kicker?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is like a small, medium-sized town in Northwest Pennsylvania. And when I was growing up in the 80s, football was king. My father played, multiple sports. He eventually got an offer from the Pittsburgh Pirates to play in the farm system, and just everyone near all the boys, played sports. So like, that's what you did. And so, my father entered me in a punt, pass, and kick contest, because I played other sports. I played basketball and baseball and soccer, but my dad saw I had this talent to kick the ball really far. So he said, "Hey, why don't you do this punt, pass, and kick?" And I did that. When I was 8, and actually I did the pass well, I did the punt well. The last thing to do was to kick, but I actually flubbed the kick. But I just discovered it was something I just really loved to do. And so when I would continue to train to be a kicker, I never really looked at it as training. It was just something that just gave me like an immense amount of joy. There was a gravel football field a few blocks from my house, and growing up, I would go there every day. I'd sling my ball bag over my shoulder and just kick all day long. I remember kicking there when till the sun would set. And also growing up in Erie, it would start snowing in November, and we'd never see grass again until March or April. And I would even kick in the winter on sheets of ice. I enjoyed it so much.
Whoa. Well, that's passionate. So who was one of your idols growing up?
Well, so my kicking idols was Gary Anderson. And I think the reason being was he went from soccer player to kicker, and that's what really got me into it, because back in the 80s, kickers, 70s, it started to change in the 80s. They would just do, the straight on kickers to toe balls. But what happened was starting in the 80s, these soccer players, and I guess some of the 70s as well, the soccer players converted into kickers. So that's what really inspired me. Like, hey, I think I can do this as well, because I was playing soccer a lot. I figured, hey, I can also be a kicker.
Interesting.
Nice.
So I'm just curious. I want to ask you about the position, because I think this is the most tough position out of any other position in football, and you guys don't get enough recognition, because when the teams draft kickers in the third, fourth, or fifth round, and they say, "What are you guys doing? Draft them in the late rounds." But do you think you guys need more recognition because how tough it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. You took me back in time when I was first dating eventually we're now married. I tried to impress my girlfriend, now wife, about how important the kicker position was. And she was also from Erie. She grew up a Steeler fan. She would just laugh about that. I used to tell her the kicker was like the backbone of the team, but she would laugh. So like going back, the kickers never really got that credit, but I understand where teams come from when they draft kickers later, because I do believe that the position is super important, and maybe it doesn't get it the credit it deserves, because there is a physical challenge to it, of course, but it has a very high degree of mental challenge. It's so easy for kickers. I remember battling this myself. If you miss a couple kicks in a row, it's very easy to just then have the yips and that's it, and not be able to recover. But I think, these teams, they wait to the later rounds or a free agent, because you just don't know what you can get. A kid can be super successful in college, but then what happens now when he's playing in front of, millions of people on TV, and now the pressure has been ratcheted up 10 times. So I think the risk for them to draft a kicker is pretty high. It makes more sense to, see what they can actually do before they make that investment.
Interesting.
Well, there's been so many things said. I have like 500 questions right now. I'm going to focus here on the one. Let's talk about the mindset and the pressure of being the kicker. Just, it's a point in time where all eyes are on you. How does that feel? How do you navigate through that? And also mindset of building up to game day.
Yeah. I think it's huge for kickers when you see these kickers in the NFL who are super successful, and all of a sudden they miss a few, and next thing you know it, they're cut and they're gone, they moved on. And, you always wonder watching them, well, how did they get through it? And I think for a lot of them, they just have to have, like a short memory. And when I was playing with the Indianapolis Colts, Jim Harbaugh was the quarterback. He was also the holder. And I remember one day I didn't have a very good practice, and I was upset. I must've showed something, physically that was bothering me. He said to me, "Hey kid, you have to have, in the NFL, you have to have a short memory." And that really stuck with me, that, this is for any position in any sport, is to not focus on the negatives. And I think the kickers that can have long, successful careers are the ones that do have that short memory and can focus more on their successes and their negatives. There was a coach that I had at the University of Pittsburgh. His name is Amos Jones, and he's still in the NFL today. He coaches for the New York Giants. But one day after practice, we came into the video room, and, I was watching videos, and I was watching all these videos of myself where I made mistakes. Like I put my foot in the wrong position. I had it turned out instead of turned, facing forward. And he said to me, "Hey, why are you spending so much time focusing on your mistakes? Why don't you watch some of your videos where you make everything is good?" And so that really helped me in my career, going forward. He actually learned that from, Bear Bryant, because he used to coach at Alabama.
Yes.
And he said that's what they would do after games. The whole team would get to the video room. He would show them a few videos of mistakes made. Hey, hey, we need to do this better. We need to do this better. But then the rest of the video session to his team was showing them success. So they would get that in their head more versus the mistakes they made. And, that's something that just seems to be it's a very powerful message, and universal, not just for athletes, but just for, us people in our day-to-day lives. It's so easy for us to focus on a couple little things that went wrong that day versus on the things that go well, and all of our, everything, that all of our blessings in life. So beyond football.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait to share that with my dad. He actually showed me some film from Bear Bryant.
Okay.
At the
Yeah.
beginning of COVID, we actually, my mom, my dad, and myself. So we watched it all together, and they're gonna love that. Especially my mom always says, like, you can look back in the past to learn from it, but don't stare.
Exactly.
So I love the short-term memory. Just let it go, and that's great advice
So,
for everything.
For sure.
So this is a two-part question. I want to ask you, what was the experience of playing in University of Pittsburgh? Obviously, that's a great college program for football and other sports. And what was it like playing there? And the next question, the next part, take me to the reaction when you were waiting with your family and you got the draft call and playing for getting to your goal playing in the NFL.
Yeah, I absolutely love playing at Pitt. You know, I got very, very, very fortunate to play at the University of Pittsburgh because I first went to a Division III school, Grove City College in Pennsylvania. And when I got to campus, I was going to walk on. The coach actually changed his mind and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, we already have a kicker. I don't need you." So I spent one semester there. And I went back home, moved back into my bedroom with the with my like hockey and Star Wars, wallpaper. And I was, 19 years old living at home again. Luckily, I then played for a Division III school where I started to get some more experience. Unfortunately, that didn't go so well too, because I like to say I was like the Happy Gilmore of kickers. I could kick the ball super far, but it not straight. So I spent 2 years there with my goal of eventually getting to Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh. So after 2 years there of having success in terms of kicking the ball really far, the leg strength, I walked on at the University of Pittsburgh. They had 4 kids already on scholarship. So I had to work my way up. And luckily, 30 minutes before game time, our first game, we're playing Kent State. The Amos Jones, special teams coach, named me the captain. And then, from there, I just had a really good season. I ended up being like one of the most accurate kickers that year. And that's what led me to, getting the contract offer from the Detroit Lions. Unfortunately, I didn't get drafted, that it wasn't common for kickers. The draft ended, and right after the draft is when they called me and offered me the contract.
I bet your book's amazing, because to go through that process, to move back into your room and then, have been on and then had to leave and then had to go out and do it again and then go through the whole process. I bet that was really personally like an incredible build for you all over.
Yeah, absolutely. It was tough. As a young kid, I was diagnosed with ADD, and I found that helped me at various points throughout my athletic career, where it would drive me. But also it's at times, until I learned to manage it better, it would also, I could get very high, but then I could also get very low. So then when things didn't work out with me with Grove City and the coach said he wasn't interested and I went back home, I got really depressed. And the only thing that got me out of that was, because I was back in Erie in January, and it was snowing all the time, and all my friends were off to college, and they were playing their sport, basketball or whatever it was. The only thing that got me out of that was kicking. I found that really, like, that was my place. That was my happy place, so to speak. And so the kicking like made me feel better. And I realized, like, hey, I can't give up this dream, because this is the fire that keeps me going.
That's amazing. And do you think that the highs were lows because of medication, or just because of part of the just of the ways that they had diagnosed the ADD?
Yeah, it was just a condition. I actually never took the medication. So they would prescribe it to me, and I would actually throw it out. This is in the book. And when I would do this in grade school, I would throw them out like at lunchtime, and then eventually they'd be found by like the janitor. Then I'd have to go to the principal's office, and then the principal. I went to a Catholic school. She'd bring out the paddle and then all that stuff and the ruler.
Wow.
But I just refused to take it. One of the reasons why I refused to take it is because I just felt like, there was something wrong with me if I had to take this medicine. So I just refused to take it, because as a kid, I just didn't feel like there was anything wrong with me. I just had a lot of energy, and I always wanted to be outside. I always wanted to be playing. And the place that I didn't want to be was school. And so for me, I never really felt like there was something like wrong with that, even though, like, the doctor, basically said, "Hey, yeah, there's something wrong with your kid." I remember he said that to my mom, like, he has to be on this medication. So I always just like rebelled and like never took it. And so, the highs and lows was the condition. But what I just did discover is, yoga for sure these days helps me with the ADD, but what I did discover is like, playing sports and kicking footballs, that also helped me. I probably at the time never knew how to put it into words, but like when I was playing a sport, there was no ADD. I was like in the moment.
You were in
and
your
just,
passion.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I wrote a thesis on ADD and also the overdiagnosis. And there are a lot of people that have a lot of similar symptoms, and it is a thing. But then, the medication was a big thing in growing up from that time period during when I grew up. But it's also interesting that when you found your passion, going outside and learning how to cope with, everybody's different learning. So it's just, it's wonderful that you found kicking and football, and you could do it through different seasons. You could go out and do it by yourself too. Just go out there and kick on the ice. That's amazing. So I'm so glad that you found that and you followed, knowing what you felt.
Yeah, that's amazing. Going through ADD and being able to focus on the same thing on your job is truly remarkable. But I want to ask you, this is another two-part question, and obviously NFL is a business. So what was it like playing for three different teams? Obviously Detroit, Indianapolis, and New York Jets. They're all great organizations. What were the experiences that you learned from the three different teams? And take us back through your injuries that you went through and that caused you to end your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, each team was a different experience, and that growing up and always dreaming of being in the NFL. It was when I got with Detroit, it was like it was not really like a shock, but I realized like how difficult like the business really is. So I didn't have much time. Like when the first day I showed up for camp, I was like, whoa, like this is. I felt the pressure of like any mistake and like that's it, because I was I was a marginal player. Like, so when you look at these NFL rosters, we love to talk about like the Tom Brady's of the world, but like they're the 1% of the NFL roster. More are like myself who, each day could like be our last day. I remember the one player next to me when I came back after practice with the Detroit Lions, and the guys next to me locker was cleared out and was gone. And I asked the player like, "Hey, where's so and so?" He said, "Well, he's gone. He got cut when we're only like a week into camp." And he says, "Don't you know what the NFL stands for?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Not for long." And the NFL, the average career length is 2.5 years. There's no guaranteed contracts. Last I knew, to get a pension, you had to be in the league for 3 years. So, for the guys who are just trying to break through, the margins are really thin. And I had a friend who played in the NFL for 2.2 years, and he didn't quite get to the 3 years to get to the pension, wherever it worked out or didn't work out. Playing for these teams was super exciting. It was. I would love to say I look back in time and like I was like really there. I was in the present moment. I was sucking the juice out of the whole time there. But there was times of that. But there was also times like when we'd go out and have sessions where, I just felt like, hey, like, don't screw up, like don't like, you got to make all these kicks. Otherwise that's it. And so there was a lot of that. And like, that's it, for kickers, like when they're trying out in training camp, but then the same goes for like the offensive tackle, the rookie who's trying to break in, try not to let that defensive end get around you. And if he does, like that's it. Cause it's really hard unless you're a veteran when you're trying to break through in these rosters, like, to not make any mistakes.
Yeah. And tell us about, growing up, yoga wasn't that, not everybody did yoga. And I've always done yoga because my mom was ahead of the curve, and she said, do all this and that. And it's so healthy for your body. And now we go on the field for camps and we see the guys doing ballet kicks, doing kicker kicks, and we see them, there's all kinds of balance and elongation, stretches. And so tell us about that. I love that I read online that your wife was one who brought you into yoga. So tell us about your thoughts on yoga. Did you have any extensive stretching routines as a kicker? Did the whole team have those same routines? And then what did she say to get you into the yoga? Because I love that. I read that about your relationship, that she brought you into a whole nother level of passion for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's changed so much. So when I was playing in the 90s, NFL players would not touch yoga. It was just considered weird. It was out there. I remember when I was with the Jets, we were working out like in the weight room, and there was a newspaper, and there was an article about a yoga teacher who actually eventually I trained with, but it said like yoga, Philadelphia Eagles do yoga. And this was 90, I guess this was 95. And I remember myself and the other players like laughing, like, oh, look at the Eagles. They're doing yoga. And I think
I saw that article.
And then I think the Jets that day we had like an aerobics class. So like that's what, because aerobics was more like the dominant thing, but like players weren't, that was very unusual. So it wasn't happening. And so unfortunately for me, like my wife was into yoga, during my career, and she tried to get me into it, but I just wanted nothing to do with it because it just didn't make any sense for me. It was like, lift weights, like gain strength. If you're in a stretch, it's going to be like a power stretch, but there was no really like the idea of doing stuff like for your mind, doing stuff for rest, for recovery, just didn't, it just wasn't there yet. And now, yeah, fortunately, like you see so many more teams, working with yoga teachers, meditation teachers, mindfulness, and the demand is huge too. Like luckily we have players like, Kobe Bryant was super into meditation, LeBron James, Tom Brady's been doing power yoga since he got into the league. And so those players have really, Sharapova, the tennis player, like all the sports. And now it's become, hey, if you're not doing some sort of yoga, meditation, mindfulness in your, in your professional life, then you're missing out.
Right.
So for sure. And I'm sorry, was there a second part of your question?
Oh, I was saying, how did she get you into it? So
how did she get me into it?
Taboo. It's kind of
right.
like, hey, I'm building up. I'm being strong,
right.
just like you said. So then what did she say to get you to try it?
Yeah, unfortunately, how she eventually got me into it, because she pushed me for many years, and she told me just to give it a shot. But eventually I finally got into it once my career was over, and once my body was in really bad shape, and once I realized that like painkillers, muscle relaxants, because that's what I always thought would get me through it all, was because that's how, like, through my playing career, I just take an 800 milligram Advil to get through it. So once my career was over and I had a really hard time like walking, standing, and I felt like I had nothing to lose, then I got into yoga. And of course, once I started doing the yoga for a few months, it felt amazing in my body. I recovered, I healed. I probably could have made a comeback, but it was too late. So of course, awesome. She was right. And if I would have listened to her, like when I when she was really pushing it, was when I was trying out for the Colts. So it was only just my second year, but I still didn't. I resisted. So
it was,
I missed out.
Thing. Right now it's huge, and but I remember back then people would say like, what's that? And I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to tell everybody I'm doing yoga.
It was a secret, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, and I even kept it a secret when I was doing it after my career. Like when I'd come back for like a Pitt football game and would have a reunion with the other players, and like, oh, what are you doing now? And like, like I would be like almost embarrassed to tell them I was doing yoga, because like it even, it took a while until later on. I think the big explosion was when the Chicago Bulls were doing it. That I think really took off in the sports world, and so that was probably around 2000, I think.
Oh, wow.
I can't wait for the book. I got to get the book. Your book.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
We had to order so many books that so like most of the athletes we had on recently, they're getting books out there, so we got to start ordering them. So
yeah, I got a couple new books. So
before we get back to yoga, I just want to ask you though, as a player, and how tough is it going through those injuries, and how tough is it when you couldn't play anymore?
Yeah, it was hard. When I played at Pitt, like my injuries were like overuse injuries. Like when I'd go into like the medical room at Pitt, or when I was the NFL training camps, they had different types of injuries, but it was just something that you just played with and understood. I had a hard time when I was with the Colts, because I was in really bad shape. My back was hurting, my hip was hurting, and I was taking the muscle relaxants, the ibuprofen, everything I could. And I remember I knew I needed a couple of days off, because my field goals, instead of being able to like make them, because you need to make them from 60 in the NFL, and your kickoffs need to go to the goal line, and they weren't doing that. So I knew I needed a few days off, but I I was afraid to go tell the special teams coach, because if I did that, they just, like, you just don't do that if you're trying to break into the NFL. So I had to just like play through it, even though I couldn't. There's definitely a lot more the whole idea of rest and recovery is more prominent now, but back then it really wasn't. There's still issues with it today. But what was really difficult is like when I was with the Jets and the doctor said, I can't find your hip flexor and your career is over. That was, it was a super low point in my life, and that was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was just to talk about what it's like as an athlete whose complete identity is a professional athlete. And so for my whole life thinking I'm going to be in the NFL. And then when I was with the Detroit Lions, I'm like, I'm a Detroit Lion, I'm in the NFL. And then I was a Jet, and then I'm a Colt. And then when that was what I thought was taken away from me, and looking back, it certainly wasn't. But when I was at that moment, like, now what? Because I never spent much time at all thinking about what was my life after football. Even though, like, I got my degree from the University of Pittsburgh, I had always imagined I'd be playing into my 30s and maybe 40 years old. And so, I really struggled with that. That's again, one of the reasons why I wanted to share in the book is how so many athletes, that they go through the same thing, just like in a different way. And we see these athletes who we think are, oh, why is this player still hanging on? Why hasn't he or she, retired yet? And for a lot of them, they're just, they don't know what's next, because all they know is, they're, being on the field, being on the court. And so it can be difficult for these athletes to move on. And for me, I struggled for a very long time with regret. Like, I'd look back, like, only if I would train this way or did this or did that, my career would be different. So it took me a while to move beyond like living in that world of regret.
Wow, that's crazy. But I want to, and then just to follow up to that one, obviously now you guys have 4 kids, and what's it like sharing your stories now in a book, and being able to do yoga with your wife? And you've done a couple of TED Talks. I love watching TED Talks too. And what's it like just sharing your story now, sharing your experience to your kids and other people in the world?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. For me, like when I share my story, either like through the book, and I also like share my experience through like my teaching, because when I teach, I just speak a little bit about like the whole idea of like being more present and not being hung up in the past, because that was really like my experience as an athlete. But what I've discovered, which has been really interesting and so fun about teaching yoga and talking about yoga with my kids, is like, just because I was an athlete, it's professional athlete, and I had this experience of thinking this is who I'm going to be. We all can relate to that, especially right now. Everyone's like making like all these career changes and questioning, what do I want to do, what do I want to do next, and so forth. And so I think it's a story that we can all relate with, that we're beyond just like what our current job is. We're beyond because these labels that we put on ourselves, that like there's like so much more that we can that we are in life beyond these limiting labels we put on ourselves.
I just want to say congratulations. I know the book came out in 2010, but congratulations on Amazing Yoga, because it sounds like you found your heart, another passion, which is amazing. And they say that it's a real healing process to write a book and to have that realization of, what am I going to do? And to then share that so that you can share it with others who are in the same position as rookies or kids or anything in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And another part, reason why I wrote the book was also, today we're living in a world like the youth sports world has become specialization and, train year round. And, these travel teams start at like very young ages and they're very competitive. And that was another reason why I wanted to write the book, is just to share the idea of like, bringing in some balance. I think it's like a universal principle, no matter how much you want to like make it to the highest level of the sport, there's got to be some sort of balance. There has to be rest. And, the other day I noticed the Pitt football team, Coach Narduzzi, the head coach, announced, or he put on his Twitter, that every single player that they signed in this year's recruiting class was a multi-sport athlete. And he talked about like the importance of that, of not just playing football, playing basketball, because not only do you learn the skills of basketball that can help you be a more well-rounded athlete, but that means when you're playing basketball, you're not playing football. And I think that can apply to all youth sports, to play baseball year round, that's a lot on the arms. So you play basketball or you play lacrosse or whatever it may be. And then these athletes, instead of burning out, because I've noticed like a lot of these young athletes not only burn out physically earlier, like we're seeing a lot of these overuse injuries at much younger age. I'm hearing about at 12 and 13, but also they're burning out mentally because they're doing so much specialization at an early age. By the time they get to 18, they're freshmen in college. They're now mentally, like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
Right. And then that playfulness is also underdeveloped. So if you have this lack of balance, you can bottom out versus if keeping it balanced. But the playfulness, the rest, we've talked to a lot of different players on the show about the importance of sleep. And I think that just like yoga, that's coming to be a conversation again too. Just sleep, meditation, yoga, and just having that balance of without the mental stress. Mental stress is like pressing like 200-pound weights all the time, just carrying it around, mental stress. So just having that time, taking that time to be playful, because like you said at the beginning of the interview, I think it's really important for the youth to understand, like if you put all of your energy into just one thing, then when something happens there, whether it's a physical injury or just or a setback where you don't kick as well or you lose a game, then it can be crushing to your life. So I think it's great advice to share this for certain with the youth.
Yeah, so I want to ask you, obviously Amazing Yoga is the Amazon bestseller. And also not only that, you wrote a lot of publications in the Yoga Journal, and you've been featured on a dozen podcasts. So what's that been like for you to have your book out there as an Amazon bestseller and being featured on a lot of podcasts like this and also writing too?
Yeah, it's been really fun. I think what's been really interesting about it is how much I've actually heard from parents and also from young athletes, like even like 12 and 13 years old. I've gotten like emails like from their parents, like after they read the book, and that was something I knew that was like one of the themes in there, but I didn't realize there'd be such a response to it. And I think it's because it's such a hot topic right now. And, what Kia just said about like the playfulness, even when I go to my son's baseball games, I like, you see a lot of that like evaporating at such a young age. Like he just turned 14, but even the last couple of years, I go to these games and like on the sidelines, like it's just youth baseball. And I feel like we're losing a lot of that. And I think, as parents, if we lose like that playfulness of just going there and like, wow, this is so awesome, my kid's playing, and if we make that more competitive, the kids are going to pick up that energy. We don't realize like maybe what we want, like, oh yeah, I want him to like play in college. Like if we start to push that on them, they're going to pick all that up, and we're going to end up end up not getting what we want. And we have to forget, like, it's all about the kid and it's all about the playfulness. And like we have to help them maintain that joy.
Yes. First of all, Sean, let me just say, I'm glad that you brought up the parenting, because you're a saint. You have 4 kids. I have 3. So I'm just gonna give you an applause, because that's amazing in itself. That's incredible. My son is 10 and he wanted to sit and he made his first feature film, and it's like 15 minutes, but I had to keep breaking him away. We have to remind them, because they become hyper-focused on what feels good and what they like. But to maintain that balance is key. So what are some of your keys to balance? In addition to the yoga, you have the 4 kids. What are some personal keys to balance through your everyday?
Yeah, for my everyday, I just, I'm lucky to have like the yoga and meditation, as you said. So I always have that there. But sometimes the yoga and meditation can be more like a job, because like that's with the work. But what I try to do is go outside as much as I can. I've noticed for me, like even like when I was like writing the book, if I just stayed inside and I started pounding away, there'd be a certain point where my work wasn't very efficient. I needed to like step away. So like, that's what I do a lot for balance whenever I can, like, is just like simply just like walking to the park with the dog, stepping away as much as I can. Just getting out to nature. I think with everything that's been happening over the past year, I think a lot of us have come back to the realizing, wow, like being outside is so important, and being out there versus like always like it's so easy in the social media world these days to like because there's so much good from it as well, but as much as we could step away, and especially like us, like we live in the city here, so for us we have to make like a little bit of an effort to get away, but that's where I found, for me, like where I found like most of like my creative outlets is stepping away like that.
That's awesome. Getting outside. So true.
Yeah, so we do this fun little segment on the show. It's called the rapid fire segment.
All right.
But before we get to that, I want to ask you two important questions. And obviously, the NFL has changed a lot. And I had the opportunity to talk to Demarius Smith on the show, the NFLPA guy, and it was truly an honor talking to him. And so I want to get your thoughts. What are your thoughts on today's NFL, how they changed, and what are your thoughts on this year, especially they're going to start doing the Black National Anthem for the social injustice. What are your thoughts on that too?
Yeah, it's taken a while to the NFL to be more open to that, and I'm glad that's finally happened. But I still think they still have a long way to go. The NBA has done a much better job with that, but hopefully, the pressure's there to keep moving in that direction. And I apologize. What was the first question?
The first one was, what are your thoughts on today's NFL? Because
right.
I talked to Demarius Smith, the NFLPA guy, and he told me a lot about it. But what are your thoughts on it?
Oh, in regards to like the safety moves?
And when you were playing, and the
right
rules and the regulations and what the players are doing now.
Yeah, it's definitely moving in a better direction. When I played, the whole concussion thing is if you came off the sideline, it was the smelling salts and get back out there. And so it's come a long way, but it still has more work to do. I would love to see the game get safer. I think, the players, I mean, I can't believe that they're going to 17 games, but the players, want more time to rest. And they what I've always thought is like these training camps have always just been too long. I mean, these players are professionals. They've proven what they can do. And, the training camp length has been really long, and it's in the middle of the summer. So, I think still like taking more and more steps towards player safety makes sense. And I know for some fans, it can seem like, oh, we're not going to see the hitting, but like it's always going to be there. But if they can take out more hitting in practice, or have less hitting in practice, and get the guys as fresh as you can, I think it'll help the game in the long run, because the players, there is a percentage that certainly enjoy hitting. Most of them don't. If they're being honest with you. I remember like, after walking after a practice from training camp, and, the players would just say to you, like, what's most important to me, probably, my guess is like 90%, but I want to be healthy. I want to be able to go home and have a dinner with my family, and I want to feel good. And when my career's over, I want to be able to golf and go to the beach and whatever. So like they still want the game to be safer. And I still feel like we could still move further in that direction.
Well said there.
Sean, walk us through your greatest NFL moment.
So yeah, my greatest moment was when I was with the Detroit Lions, and believe it or not, it was just an extra point. For me, I didn't have much playing time because like I would be in training camp and then get cut, training camp cut. And so for the Detroit Lions, it was just, I made an extra point, and that's actually how I came up with the title of the book, The Point After, because that's all I made in the NFL was 1 point, and it was the point after, and the idea was like a play on words that like the point of the book and the story is well beyond football. But that was like my big moment. And when I made that extra point, I remember coming over the sidelines, and even one of the players for Detroit said, "Oh, that's going to be your first kick of many in the NFL." That's what the punter told me. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. That was actually my last point. And I was able to sign with 2 other teams, but didn't get on the scoreboard. But like that was it. That was the big highlight.
And how did you feel? Was it just amazing?
It was just it was kind of surreal. I remember it was the most nervous I ever was for an extra point in my career, because usually, an extra point, very routine. But I remember, inside being super nervous, shaking, and because the pressure was, man, like if you miss an extra point, like that's it. Like no other team's ever going to look at you. So I remember being very nervous and then very relieved. Like once it went through, and I think if I've had more opportunities, because getting that first kick out of your system is always really big. I know for my first college kick that I made, I was crazy nervous. My leg was literally shaking, and it was like a 33-yard field goal that hardly made it, but like in practice it would have gone through and had 30 yards to spare. But like I was just so nervous, and then I felt better after that. So I think that's with like a lot of sports, just getting that first one out of the way, and then you're relaxed. So that was the big one, and but unfortunately that was also the last one.
I'm glad you had that experience. It's a pressure position. That's incredible. It's incredible to hear, because you're right. It is, there's a lot of pressure when you put a whole bunch of eyes and energy around you on your performance. So I'm so glad that you had that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, you go.
Oh, no, I was going to say, like, it was one of those things, the whole family drove up, they drove up from Erie, and they're all there. And, so it was always interesting being like that was like my rookie year, because like the rookies, like, their families were always there. And then afterwards they were there. And, for them, like, no matter what you did, you couldn't go wrong. So for them, it was the biggest deal in the world. And, unfortunately, like I said earlier, I was always like, what's next? So once that game was over, I was like, what's next? So.
Yeah, I'm so glad that they were all there for you too, because rookie camp and just that can be, what I've heard, an amazingly lonely time. And it's such a transition, a life transition too. So I'm glad that they were all there. That's very amazing.
Yeah, it could be super lonely. That was actually my biggest challenge at camp was missing my girlfriend and wife, and my family. My dad came up one day and he got a room at the Motel 6, and I was able to like go spend the night with him the one time, and that was like such a big deal to get out of that, because it's hard, because training camp, it depends on which like who your roommate is, who you associate with, because you can be around super positive players, but it's also very easy to be around players who maybe like they're done. And so like they're more negative and they're ready to move on. And so like I've had roommates like that, who like, call home every night and they can't wait to get cut. And then I've, been lucky enough to have roommates who like, this is like we're like with Detroit, I had a roommate, Mike Iquinella was his name. And he was just like, this was the best in the world. And I felt the same way. So that really made a huge difference, like, for my mental state through camp. Yeah. So you have to block all that out, the negative.
Absolutely. Mirroring is so important. That's why when we can choose who we surround ourselves with, we do.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
You ready for this rapid fire segment?
Yes.
All right. First one here. I'm sure you're a big NBA fan too. So Kawhi Leonard's laugh or Kevin Hart's laugh?
I always laugh at the reaction.
Kawhi Leonard.
Okay.
Favorite place to vacation?
Favorite place to vacation? Like Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. Nice. I've been there like 6 times. My parents have a house down there, so I've been there like 6-7 times. It's amazing.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. I want to get to 2 kickers. Obviously they play for Detroit and Indianapolis. What are your thoughts on Matt Prater and Adam Vinatieri?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I love Adam Vinatieri. I played in the World Football League with the Scottish Claymores. He played in the World Football League like the year after me. And he somehow just retired, which is unbelievable to me. The same with when I was with Detroit, Jason Hansen. This is in 1993, and he just retired. So I've always had a soft spot for Adam Vinatieri, just because we're similar in age, and how he was able to. We also had similar paths where he went World Football League to NFL. I went from NFL to World Football League, hopefully back to NFL, but it didn't happen. But he got back, and so I've always just like been like a huge fan of his, and also just him making the kicks he made. And my favorite kick of all time watching was the kick against the Raiders in the snow that he made. Cause it not only was kick amazing, but that's like in Erie, that's how I would kick. I would kick on the snow, and I'd make those kind of kicks all the time. And he made that kick and how the ball like kind of wobbled through the goalposts, and he tried not to crush it. He knew he just wanted to kick it straight and get it up. And that's exactly what he did. And so just watching him, he's always been one of my favorite kickers to root for.
And also, what are your thoughts on Matt Prater from Detroit? And also, I can't leave out David Akers also.
Oh yeah. I'm also big, huge fans. To be honest with you, I'm a fan of every single kicker because what they go through, like even if it's a team I'm rooting for. So I have a lot of rooms. I root for the teams I played for, but also, I root for the Steelers. I root for the Browns. But like if the other team, the other guy is lining up for a game-winning field goal, if he makes it to beat my team, I'm cool with it because I don't want to see the kicker miss it and then what he has to go through. But those are two great kickers too as well.
Sean, who's one of your favorite coaches? It could be player development or any type of fellowship, mentorship that you've experienced.
Yeah, my favorite was definitely Amos Jones, the kicker that I told you had that amazing story and that he shared with me, but he also helped the trajectory of my career. But beyond that, I guess my other favorite coach would be Bill Cowher. When I was after I got the offer with the Detroit Lions, I also got calls from the Arizona Cardinals and the Steelers for a tryout because I hadn't signed my contract yet, so I was still able to go try out with the Steelers. And I met him after the tryout. He pulled me into his office, and he was a super young coach at the time. It was either his first or second years, and he was at the time I think maybe the youngest coach in the NFL ever, maybe 32, 33. So it was like a really big deal. But I just remember him bringing me into his office, and I just had the tryout, and I figured, okay, this is the head coach. He's going to speak to me for 2 minutes. First of all, I was surprised that he even brought me. I'm just this kicker. Why is he bringing me into his office to even talk about it? Usually they have other coaches do that kind of work, but he brought me in and he said, have a seat, and we talked for like a half an hour, and it was maybe 20 minutes about life and family. And then we got to the football part at the end, but he was just such a super genuinely interested in you kind of person. And also just so infectious. And you talk about like the playfulness of the game. This guy just loved football and just loved it for the game that it was, but he loved it for the players. And then when I watched his career after that, and they always said, oh, he's a player's coach. And I was lucky enough to have that experience just in like a 30-minute meeting, but you walked out of there like you couldn't help but to love football like even more, because like when he spoke to you, his eyes just lit up, like whatever he was talking about, like with football, and you couldn't help but to just feel that from him and feed off that.
That's an incredible share. This is turning into a 30 for 30.
We got to put this out on ESPN, 30 for 30. Documentary.
Thank you. I appreciate that share. That's awesome, Sean.
That's really cool. I want to ask you though, what was it like playing with Jim Harbaugh, and now he's a coach? And did he ever reach out to you for a coaching gig also?
No, he did not. But Jim Harbaugh was probably one of the most interesting players that I met along the way. Him and Barry Sanders, I'd say were the two, just because I think on how they acted, how they went about the game, and also like what they said. And Jim Harbaugh, when he's with the Colts, he was also very much in the mold of like a Bill Cowher, who was someone super infectious. And it was interesting because Jim Harbaugh, they say like he beats to a different drum, which is true. And he says things that like, people think are outlandish or what may be the case. But he was also, here's that word again, playful. There was something about playing with him and how he loved the game and how he just went about his business. And yeah, he was there and he had a contract and it was a job, but he was one of those guys when you saw him, like he took you back to your childhood. Like he knew that it was still a game and he was having fun. And that's like a bright light in the NFL because it's so hard to maintain that kind of attitude. You can see like in his coaching now, some of the stuff that he does, he still brings in playfulness to being a head coach. And so he was someone that always just like inspired me beyond, to keep going when I was in the career, but also like looking back, how he looked at the game, which what it was to him, a game.
Yeah. Sean, you've made a lot of sacrifices and you had a lot of great success. Do you currently coach any of the NFL teams on yoga or kicker expertise?
Yeah, so we 2 years ago we worked with the Pitt football team. A few years before that, we worked with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It all depends on, like, for these teams, is the strength coach. So if the strength coach believes in the addition of yoga, that's when we'll usually like work with these teams. We also get a lot of professional athletes here, between the Steelers, the Penguins, and the Pirates, the Pitt basketball team, men's, women. They'll come into the studio a lot, so we'll work with them as well, like one-on-one privates. Sometimes they come to the group classes. And so that's been something that's, is for me is really fun to work with, because what I try to do when I work with them is not only help them with their current physical, like what they're going through, but I also think about like what's happening in post-career, because if they take up yoga and meditation now while they're in their career, it's a good chance that they won't have to be like in my position where their body is already completely built up and they have to try this yoga thing, which is like out there. So if they're already in the mode of doing something that's beyond, just their physical, training routine, they've taken on a practice of yoga and meditation, there's a good chance that they'll take it on afterwards, which they're going to need just as much, if not more, once their careers are over.
That's so powerful. That's amazing. That's using your story and for good. That's incredible.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. So, I want to go to the NBA real quick. What was your thoughts when the Milwaukee Bucks finally won the second championship? The last one was in 1971, but now they finally won another one. So, what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm a huge Giannis fan, for a variety of reasons, and so I was rooting for the Bucks all the way. And he also, I don't know if he practices yoga and meditation, but I don't know if you've ever seen that video out there where he was interviewed, and I'm just paraphrasing, where they ask him, it's a post-game interview, and they asked him like, how are you so wise as such a young player? And he said, like, if I just think about like what I did yesterday, like, oh, I scored 30 points, I scored 40 points, I did this, I did that. That's my ego. If I think about what I'm going to do in the future, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. That's my pride talking. So what I try to do is stay in the present moment and have fun and play. And I was like, wow, like, I mean, this is like, he's figured it out. And he's a player. Like when you watch him play, like he's like really there, and he does, again, he's a very playful player, and it's like impossible not to root for him. So yeah, love watching that finals.
I love how he passed around the trophy and he said, I want you to experience this moment too.
Right.
That was very considerate.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Eagles, Flyers, Phillies, and Sixers?
Well, interesting here in Pittsburgh. There's certainly that rivalry, but so the Eagles. So that whole division is, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen this year. Each team is in such a weird situation that I think it's anyone's taking. What was the other? The Flyers. Well, how far do the Flyers go this year? I'm trying to think. Like the Penguins got knocked out early, and like as soon as the Penguins leave when it comes to the NHL, I usually step out.
So, will you be rooting for the Flyers or for the Sixers at all? Because I know that you follow players too.
Oh, I absolutely, yeah. I almost follow players more than teams. Yeah, I like the Sixers, just because I'm an old school basketball guy. Celtics, Dr. J, Sixers. So when I see the Sixers on, I still root for them, and especially here, like in Pittsburgh, we don't have an NBA team, so I love the Pitt basketball teams. I root for the Cavs because I grew up not too far from Cleveland. But then other than that, I just watched the game. I actually really love the NBA right now. It may even be my favorite sport. The players right now, the level is just so amazing. And my son's got me really into it too, because just, a lot of kids these days, they love players. Like when it comes to the Pirates, he's not rooting for the Pirates. I wouldn't say he's not rooting for the Pirates, but he doesn't follow them. One of the reasons because they're struggling right now. But that's seems to be like the new thing with kids. It's all about players, and so he's always like, "Hey, did you hear what so and so did?" And it's so I feel like I know more now about players than just specific teams. Through my son and his TikTok or wherever he's getting his
That's
info.
So true. That's so true.
I'm a New York Knicks fan, so
they had a surprisingly very good year.
Yeah, they finally, I think they're back. So let's see what happens there. But I want to ask you, funniest teammate that you played with.
Funniest teammate. Funniest teammate. Wow. Let me think here for a second. I would have to say it'd be Chris Spindler with the Detroit Lions. I don't know if this was funniest or maybe the most outlandish. So when you're a rookie, they do initiation. And they'll just have you do like weird things. Like for me, like the punters and the kickers there that were already a team, they make me carry their pads back to the locker room or the helmet. So that wasn't so bad. But he was like the leader of the whole initiation thing. And I remember he would duct tape players to the goalpost, and not for very long, just for like a couple minutes, and not completely like around, but there was just like the most like bizarre things. But that was the whole initiation thing in the NFL. I look back and I'm like, wow, like that's some crazy stuff. But that was another thing that like the players had to go through, because not only like were you worried about getting your job, but then it was like after practice, am I going to get duct taped to the goalpost? I don't even know if they even do that anymore.
That's what I want to know. Do they do that? I'm going to start asking players that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know to what extreme, there were stories that I heard. I know that like there was, I know one team, they would put the guys in the shower and they would turn it on super hot and then super cold, super hot, super cold, stuff like that. I mean, most of the stuff was pretty harmless, but it was one guy, I remember, I think I was with the Colts. They came back and this was kind of mean. They cleared out his locker. So he came back and he thought that he was cut. So that was rough. So there's stuff like that, but most of it is, like I said, is pretty light and playful. Like, one team I remember they changed like the code, like to get it back into the building. So when the kid was come back from practice, he couldn't get in because like they changed the code or something like that. So there's stuff like that. So, but yeah, you could probably write a whole book on the on what goes on with that.
That's crazy.
And so taking it a little bit lighter, what is your favorite food? Or, are you a super into nutrition since you're into the yoga and the whole clean body?
Yeah, I mean, I try to eat as clean and as vegetarian, as organic as possible, but it's really hard when I have like 4 kids. So we're I don't know what you'd call us, like flexitarian, so to speak. We try to eat super clean, but it's just with the kids and driving around all over the place, it's a losing battle. So we try not to get too serious about the food, but we try.
It's a challenge
for sure.
So the last 2 things here before we let you go, and our team is part of this foundation. It's called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. He's a former NFL coach, but now he's the offensive coordinator at Tennessee State and with Eddie George. We're trying to help him prevent human trafficking, making sure the community stays safe and the kids stay safe. And I'll send you this foundations to you and your wife, and so you can
absolutely
go check it out.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah, and the last thing here. Would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a huge thank you, and just thinking about you, wishing you all the best, especially with the new resurgence here, and sending them all the best and thanks. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, well said. And there it is. That wraps up episode 861 with former NFL kicker from the Colts, Jets, and Lions, Sean Conley. Now he has a book out. Everyone go check out his book. It's coming out soon. It's called The Point After. This was truly an honor, Sean. We learned a lot today. Your story is truly inspiring. And like Kia said, we have to get there, put it on ESPN 30 for 30, 30 show. But thank you again for coming on. It's truly an honor. You and your family stay safe. We would like to have you back as a returning guest at some point so you can meet the full team. But man, you're like I said, this story is amazing. So
absolutely. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed speaking with both of you. It was really fun. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
Thanks
you,
for the
Sean.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Kia.
Thank you.